A man who lost everything, a woman with everything to lose, and a child who never stopped hoping. This isn't just a story about a broken-down cabin deep in the woods. It's about second chances, hidden identities, and the kind of love that takes years to find its way home. What if the woman he helped was the mother his son had never known? And what if she had a secret big enough to change everything? If you love heartfelt stories that heal, inspire, and linger long after they end, take a moment to subscribe and join our growing family of kind-hearted souls. You won't want to miss what comes next. Now let's begin. A poor single father fixed a woman's cabin, unaware she was a billionaire, and the mother he'd lost. The wind shifted as it often did in the foothills of the Bitterroot Mountains, abrupt, untamed, and full of secrets. Jack Turner tightened the collar of his worn flannel shirt and wiped the back of his hand across his brow, already damp despite the late October chill. His hammer rested on the porch railing, silent for once. It had been a long day of patching fence posts, splitting firewood, and checking on the leaking roof of the shed. Just another Tuesday. Behind him, the faint clatter of toy trucks echoed from the kitchen, where his 8-year-old son, Noah, was constructing imaginary roads across the linoleum floor. Jack smiled at the sound, grateful in a way that only a man who had lost everything once could be. His world was small, perhaps, but it was his, anchored by his boy, a pile of tools, and the quiet dignity of surviving. Then he heard it, a sputter, a stall, then silence. Jack turned his head toward the narrow mountain road beyond the tree line. It wasn't common for strangers to wander this deep into the hills. Locals knew the terrain was rough, cell service spotty, and the road unforgiving to anyone without four-wheel drive. Another minute passed. Nothing. Then, a sharp knock at his front gate. Jack grabbed his jacket and headed out. A woman stood there, wrapped in a navy coat that was far too thin for the cold. Her chestnut hair was tied back messily, her boots splattered in mud. Her hands were tucked under her arms, not for politeness, but warmth. "Hi," she said, voice shaky but firm. I think I'm lost. My car broke down about a mile back. I was hoping to find anyone, really." Jack studied her face. There was something oddly familiar about her. Not in a way he could place, but in the way her eyes looked past him for half a second, like she wasn't just seeing him, but also some ghost from her past. "You're lucky," Jack said, stepping aside. "Not many folks come this far up and find a soul. Come in, warm up." She hesitated, then nodded. "Thank you." Inside, the wood stove crackled to life as Jack tossed another log on the fire. Noah peeked from behind the kitchen counter. "Daddy, who's she?" Jack ruffled his son's hair. "Just a traveler, got stuck. Be polite." Noah grinned. "Hi, traveler." The woman smiled, really smiled this time, and knelt down. "Hi there. I'm Emma." Jack's heart stopped for just a second. Emma. But no, it couldn't be. The Emma he had known was long gone. That name hadn't been spoken aloud in this house in nearly a decade. He shook the thought off. "You're welcome to stay here a while," Jack said. "But if you're up for a walk, there's an old cabin just a bit down the ridge, abandoned for years, but solid bones. I could help you fix it up, give you some space while you sort out." "Your car?" Emma looked surprised. "You'd do that? For someone you just met?" Jack shrugged. "I've been the one stuck before. People helped me when I didn't deserve it. I figure I owe the world some good." She looked at him for a moment, longer than people usually do when they're just being polite. Then she said softly, "I'll take you up on that." By dusk, they were walking together beneath a canopy of pine and spruce, the world bathed in amber light. The cabin stood like a forgotten promise at the edge of the clearing. Jack kicked open the swollen door and stepped inside. Dust, cobwebs, and silence. "I'll come back tomorrow with tools," Jack said. "Some new boards, maybe a stove if I can find one. Won't be fancy, but it'll be warm." Emma ran her fingers along the windowsill. It's more than enough. He looked at her. You got a place you're trying to get back to? She paused. Not really. I guess I'm trying to get away from somewhere. Jack nodded slowly. He understood that better than most. They stood in silence, the kind that feels like the air is listening too. Then she turned to him and asked, "What about you? Just you and your son out here?" "Just us," he said. "Been that way since he was born." "No mother?" "No," he said, voice quiet now. "She didn't stay." Emma looked down at her hands. That must have been hard. Jack didn't respond right away. It was worse not knowing why. One day she was gone. Took me years to stop wondering. He expected her to say something. Back, maybe offer one of those empty comforts people give when they don't know what else to say. But she only whispered, "Some things aren't as simple as they look from the outside." Jack turned to look at her, really look at her, but just then Noah came running up from the trail, breathless. "Dad, I found a rabbit. A real one." Jack chuckled and ruffled his son's hair again. Emma watched the moment, father and son side by side. Her face was unreadable, but her eyes shimmered. "Thank you," she said suddenly. "For what?" "For not asking too many questions." Jack smiled. "Sometimes answers come when they're ready. No need to rush them." They stood at the edge of the cabin, under the early stars, as the forest settled around them, like a secret waiting to be shared. Neither of them knew it yet, but this forgotten cabin and this second chance meeting was about to rebuild far more than just broken wood. The mountain cabin breathed with new life. Jack had returned the next morning, just after sunrise, a toolbox in one hand and a bag of provisions in the other, coffee, canned beans, and a small pot-bellied stove he'd bartered for years ago and never used. It was dented and ugly but warm. Reliable, like him in a way. Emma had already cleared the front porch of leaves when he arrived. She greeted him with a nod, her eyes shadowed by fatigue and something deeper, something unspoken. "Didn't expect you so early," she said. Jack shrugged, setting the tools down with a familiar thud. "I don't sleep much, and I figured if you're going to be here a while, you'll need more than 4 walls and cobwebs." She offered a faint smile. 4 walls were already more than I had yesterday. They worked side by side in silence, the kind that wasn't uncomfortable, just cautious, like the space between people learning how to be human with each other again. Jack sanded a warped window frame while Emma swept out the hearth. Occasionally their eyes would meet, but they didn't say much. She didn't volunteer anything about her past, and Jack didn't pry. He was a man who had learned the value of silence, not as avoidance, but as kindness. Around midday, Noah arrived with a sandwich and 100 questions. "Are you staying here forever?" he asked Emma, crumbs clinging to the corners of his mouth. Emma laughed. "I doubt it." "Why not?" "Well, I don't really have a forever place." "Not yet." Noah furrowed his brow. "Everyone should have a forever place. Mine is with my dad." Jack gave his son a quick look, proud, amused, and a little embarrassed all at once. Emma paused, her smile softening. "That's a pretty special thing, Noah." "Did you ever have a kid?" Jack started to intervene, but Emma raised a hand gently. "I did," she said quietly. "A long time ago." Noah blinked. "Where is he?" Jack froze. Emma stared out the window, her jaw tight. "I don't know," she whispered. "I lost him." Noah, innocent and unaffected by adult caution, reached out and touched her arm. "Maybe you'll find him." Emma didn't answer, but her eyes shimmered with something raw and fragile, grief that had never been grieved out loud. After Noah left, Jack watched Emma quietly as she wiped dust from a shelf. "You don't have to answer this," he said gently, "but I gotta ask. Are you safe?" She looked up, startled. "I mean, whoever you're running from, are they a danger to you or to Noah?" Emma let out a breath, a short, sharp sound that was half laugh, half sigh. "I'm not running from anyone dangerous," she said. Only the person I used to be. That stopped Jack cold. He nodded slowly, like a man who understood far too well. That's harder to outrun than any person. They didn't speak of it again. As the days passed, the cabin began to feel less like a broken structure and more like a shelter for unspoken truths. Jack installed shelves and repaired the wood stove. Emma sewed curtains from old flannel shirts Jack donated. It was a strange kind of companionship, functional, quiet, but not empty. Each evening, she joined Jack and Noah for dinner. Simple meals, stew, cornbread, black coffee, but they filled. The cabin with warmth that had nothing to do with temperature. Emma was different around Noah, softer. Her laughter came easier, even if her smiles never quite reached her eyes. Jack noticed. He noticed everything, but he said nothing. Then one evening, as the sun dipped behind the pines, Emma sat on the porch steps, cradling a chipped mug of tea. Jack sat beside her, hands calloused, boots dusty. "Thank you," she said suddenly, "for all of this." He glanced sideways. "For fixing some rotten floorboards?" "For not asking who I was before this," she said. "Everyone wants to know your story. You don't. I figure people tell you what matters when they're ready," Jack said. Emma nodded. "I wasn't always this lost, you know. I never thought you were." She turned to him then, and for a brief second her face opened, vulnerable, stripped bare. "I was a different person before," she said. "The kind that believed in clean lines, clear choices, perfect plans. I thought money could buy distance from pain. Turns out it just makes the silence louder." Jack didn't reply. He didn't have to. She looked at him, really looked at him. "And you? What did you believe in before all this?" Jack chuckled, low and soft. "I believed in," Emma's breath caught. "The mother of your son," he nodded. "We were young. Too young to know what forever meant. But I loved her. I still don't know why she left." Emma's eyes filled and she looked away. "Maybe," she whispered, "she didn't want to. Maybe she didn't have a choice." Jack stared into the trees. "There's always a choice." "Not always," Emma said, so quietly he almost didn't hear her. Silence fell between them again, but it wasn't empty this time. It was full of ache and possibility, like something buried beneath snow that might thaw in spring. And for the first time, Jack wondered, truly wondered, who this woman was, and why she felt like someone he'd known once, in another life. By the third morning, the frost clung to the window panes like delicate lace, and Jack knew the real Montana winter was only a few weeks away. Time had a way of slipping through your fingers in the mountains. One day you were patching up holes, the next you were shoveling snow out of your own footprints. He arrived at the cabin before sunrise, as promised, a thermos of coffee in one hand and a coil of copper wire slung over his shoulder. Inside, Emma was already awake, curled beside the wood stove with a blanket around her shoulders and a notebook in her lap. She was scribbling something, but when he stepped in, she closed the book quickly, too quickly. "Morning," she said, attempting a casual tone. "Morning," Jack replied, setting down his tools. "Thought I'd install some proper lighting today. Got a few battery-powered fixtures. Not fancy, but they'll do the job." Emma smiled. "I'm starting to think you don't believe in fancy." Jack chuckled. "Fancy breaks. Simple lasts." She looked at him then, as though she wanted to say something more. But the moment passed. Jack got to work wiring the cabin. As he moved between beams and floorboards, Emma followed quietly, watching him with the curious attentiveness of someone rediscovering what it means to trust. Noah arrived shortly after breakfast, his backpack bouncing behind him, holding his newest treasure, a rusted metal toy car he'd found in the brush behind the house. "I'm going to clean it up," he announced proudly. "Maybe Mom—" He stopped, blinking. "Maybe Emma can help me." Emma froze for a second, then nodded. "Of course." Jack didn't miss the pause, nor did he miss the way Emma's hands trembled just slightly when she accepted the toy. Later that afternoon, while Jack repaired a crack along the outer wall, Emma brought him a cup of coffee. She stood quietly for a while, watching him plane a warped plank with rhythmic strokes. "You know," she said softly, "watching you work is oddly comforting." Jack wiped his brow. "Better than a therapist?" She smiled. "Cheaper anyway." He looked up at her, saw the amusement in her eyes, but also the weight behind it. "Do you ever think," she continued, "that fixing something broken is easier than fixing yourself?" Jack leaned back on his heels, thoughtful. "Wood's honest. You know where it's weak. You see the rot. People hide their cracks." Emma didn't respond right away. Then, almost like a confession, she said, "I wasn't there when my child was born." Jack froze. "I was in a hospital, yes," she continued, her voice distant, "but not in the room, not the way I should have been. Decisions were made for me, things were said, and I believed them. I let them take him away from me." Jack turned toward her, the air between them suddenly heavier, tighter. Emma's eyes glistened, but she didn't cry. She was too tired for tears. This wasn't grief blooming. It was grief that had been buried too long, dug up by accident. "I've made peace with some of it," she added, "but not all, not even close." Jack looked at her carefully. "You don't seem like someone who gives up easy." "I didn't give up," she said, almost defensive. "I was told that he'd be better off without me." Jack's hands clenched instinctively. "Who told you that?" Emma didn't answer. Instead, she turned toward the window, toward the sound of Noah laughing outside as he rolled the toy car down a wooden ramp. "I think," she said finally, "that some people don't know the damage they do until it's too late to fix." Jack stood beside her. "And some people spend their lives trying to undo it anyway." They stood in silence, a healing kind of silence, one that didn't ask for explanations, only presence. That evening, while Emma prepared dinner, Noah came, running into the cabin with wide eyes and dirt-smudged cheeks. "I found something," he announced breathlessly. Emma and Jack followed him outside to where an old tree stump sat half-hidden near the cabin's edge. Noah knelt beside a patch of moss and pointed. "Look, it's a box." Sure enough, a rusted tin box lay wedged beneath. A stone slab. Jack pried it open carefully, revealing several yellowed letters inside, tied with a faded ribbon. Emma gasped. The handwriting was delicate, looped, unmistakably hers. Jack held one up, brow furrowed. "These are addressed to me." Emma reached for them, then hesitated. "I wrote those," she whispered, "years ago. I never mailed them. I must have hidden them here, before I left." Jack stared at her, stunned. Emma looked away. "I didn't think I'd ever come back, but I couldn't throw them away." Jack unfolded one of the letters, his rough fingers brushing across the worn ink. "Jack, I don't know if you'll ever forgive me. Maybe you shouldn't. But I need you to know I never stopped loving you." He looked up at her. Emma was already walking away, her arms crossed over her chest, as if holding herself together by force. Jack didn't call after her. He simply stood there, holding a piece of a past he thought had vanished forever. Inside, Noah peered at the letters curiously. "What are those, Dad?" Jack looked down at his son, the boy who had only ever known a mother as a memory. "Old words," he said quietly, "words that never made it home." Noah tilted his head. "Are they love letters?" Jack nodded slowly. "Yeah, I think they are." And in that moment, standing at the edge of something once lost, and maybe, just maybe, found again, Jack realized the cabin wasn't the only thing being rebuilt. That night, Emma couldn't sleep. The letters sat on the small wooden table near the window, tied again in the faded ribbon, but nothing could bind the emotions they had unwrapped. Words she had forgotten, no, buried, had now found their way back into the light, and with them, a pain she had taught herself to live above. She stepped outside into the crisp mountain air. The moon hung low and pale over the clearing. From the main house, she could see the faint amber glow from Jack's kitchen window. She wondered if he was reading more of the letters, if he had reached the one where she told him about the baby. Her breath caught. No. That letter. She had never written it. She had wanted to, countless times. But fear always stopped her hand. Fear that it was too late, that he wouldn't believe her, or worse, that he no longer cared. The floor creaked behind. Emma turned. Jack stood in the doorway of the cabin, silhouetted by the soft light from the wood stove. In his hand was one of the letters, folded, worn, red. "I forgot how you used to sign your name with that little heart," he said softly, a strange tenderness in his voice. "I always liked that." Emma said nothing. The quiet between them was thick with everything unsaid. He stepped outside, joining her under the stars. "These letters," he continued, "they're full of love, but also pain, regret. I can't help but wonder, why didn't they ever reach me?" Emma swallowed. "Hard, because I never sent them. I wrote them after I left. I'd sit in that cabin day after day, trying to explain what happened. But I couldn't find the courage to put them in the mailbox, so I buried them, along with everything else." Jack looked at her, eyes steady. "Why did you leave, Emma?" She looked away. "I was told to. My father, he said you'd moved on, that you didn't want the baby, that you didn't want me." Jack stepped back, stunned. "That's not true." "I know that now," she said, voice trembling. "But I was 23, pregnant, scared, and I believed him. He flew me across the country the day after I told him, took my phone, told me it was over." Jack's hands curled into fists. "And you never tried to reach me." "I did," she whispered. "Once, a year later. I sent a letter to your old apartment. I never got a reply." "Because I never got it," Jack said bitterly. "I moved in with my brother for a while after you left. I couldn't afford the rent. If that letter came, it never made it to me." Emma blinked hard. I thought maybe you really didn't care." Jack exhaled, long and low, like air slowly escaping a wound. "Emma, I loved you. I loved you with everything I had." "I know," she said, voice breaking, "and I'm sorry. I should have fought harder. I should have trusted you, not him." Silence fell again, heavier this time. Years of miscommunication and manipulated truths hung between them like fog that refused to lift. Then, from the main house, a light flicked on upstairs. Noah. Emma's eyes followed the glow, her face softening. "He's beautiful," she said. "So full of life. And so kind." Jack glanced toward the house, his expression guarded. "He's been through a lot, but he's a good kid." Emma hesitated, then spoke carefully. "Does he know about her?" Jack looked at her, unsure. "I mean," she clarified. "What? Did you tell him about his mother?" Jack stared at the ground. "The truth I knew at the time, that she left, that maybe she wasn't ready. I never told him her name, figured it wasn't mine to give." Emma's breath hitched. "So he doesn't." No, no." She nodded slowly, folding her arms as if bracing against more than just the cold. Jack turned to her. "Emma, are you saying—" She met his eyes, steady and raw. "Yes, Jack. Noah is my son." For a long, painful moment, nothing moved. Not the trees, not the wind, not even the air between them. Then Jack whispered, "I knew there was something. He has your eyes." Emma smiled through her tears. "And your stubborn chin." Jack let out a breath that was part relief, part heartbreak. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "I was scared," she said. "I didn't know if I had the right, and when I saw him, it just broke me. I thought I'd lost everything. And then suddenly, there he was, alive, happy, loved. I didn't want to ruin that." "You wouldn't have," Jack said, his voice rough. "You would have made it whole." Emma wiped her cheeks. "Do you think he'd ever forgive me?" Jack didn't answer right away. He just looked toward the cabin again, toward the flickering light of a boy who didn't yet know that everything was about to change. "He's got a big heart," Jack said finally. "Bigger than mine. If there's anyone who'd understand, it's Noah." Emma nodded, her voice barely audible. "Then maybe there's still time." Jack looked at her, not the woman she'd become, not the mistakes of the past, but the girl he had once loved, the mother his son had never known. And for the first time in years, he felt something shift in his chest. Not quite forgiveness. Not yet, but the door was open. "Come inside," he said gently. "It's getting cold." Emma followed him back toward the light, and somewhere, buried beneath the years and the pain and the silence, something small and fragile began to stir, something like hope. The storm came without warning. One minute the sky was dull but quiet, the way it often was in the Montana highlands in early November. The next, the wind began to howl, low and guttural, like some ancient animal waking from its sleep. Jack looked up from the porch, sensing it before he saw it. Years of living off the land had sharpened his instincts. He could feel it in the shift of the trees, in the sudden hush of birdsong, in the way the air turned cold enough to bite. He called into the house, "Noah, gather the kindling. We'll need a good fire tonight." From the living room, a clatter of boots followed by the sound of small feet scrambling to obey. Jack moved quickly, covering the woodpile, checking the shutters, fastening the tarps over the old truck. But as he worked, his mind wasn't on the storm. It was on her, Emma. Their conversation the night before had shaken something loose inside him. Something he hadn't realized was still buried. Knowing the truth didn't erase the past, but it changed it. It reframed every ache, every unanswered question. It softened his anger, stirred old, unwanted hope. And now she was gone. She hadn't said where, just that she needed some air. That had been hours ago. The first flakes of snow were falling by the time he reached the trail. Visibility was dropping fast. The wind whipped through the trees like it had something to prove. He grabbed his coat, flashlight, and a wool blanket, and without another word to Noah, who watched him with wide, worried eyes, Jack set off into the forest. The storm turned violent quickly. Snow stung his face thick and fast, as if the sky itself had lost control. The flashlight barely cut through the curtain of white. The trail he'd cleared days ago was now indistinguishable from the rest of the woods. But he knew these trees. He knew the curve of the land, the way the rocks jutted at odd angles just past the second bend, the broken fence post near the old elk trail. He moved with certainty, driven by something far stronger than fear. He found the cabin dark, the door creaked open under his hand. Inside, only silence and cold. "Emma," he called. "Emma, are you here?" Nothing. Panic began to rise. He turned and scanned the woods again, the wind nearly knocking him back. Then a flash of navy blue near the ravine's edge. "Emma!" He ran toward her. She was curled near the base of a tree, her coat half covered in snow, her eyes closed, lips pale. Jack dropped to his knees. No. "Emma, stay with me." He shook her gently, then more firmly. Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused. "I was just trying to think," she murmured. "In the middle of a damn blizzard?" Jack growled, his voice cracking. "You could have died out here." Emma tried to sit up, then winced. "I didn't mean to go far. I felt like I couldn't breathe." Jack wrapped the blanket around her, lifted her into his arms. "Well, congratulations," he muttered, half angry, half relieved. "You're breathing now." She was lighter than he remembered. Or maybe it was adrenaline dulling the weight. Either way, he carried her like he had years ago, when they used to dance barefoot on cabin floors before life had gotten too complicated. By the time they reached the main house, his arms were trembling, and his boots soaked through, but Emma was still breathing. That was all that mattered. Noah had stoked the fire high and had 2 mugs of hot cocoa waiting. Jack laid Emma on the couch, wrapped her in thick quilts. Her skin had regained a hint of color, and her eyes were clearer now. "You're lucky," he said, crouching beside her. "Another 30 minutes and—" "I know," she whispered. Noah hovered near the armrest. "Is she going to be okay?" Jack nodded. "She'll be fine." Emma reached out a hand, and Noah took it without hesitation. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice hoarse. "I didn't mean to scare you." Noah looked at her, confused. "Why were you out there?" Emma looked at Jack. He met her gaze, then gave a slight nod. "Permission." She turned back to Noah. "Because I was afraid," she said honestly. "Sometimes grown-ups get scared too." Noah tilted his head. "Scared of what?" Emma's lip quivered. "Of being too late." Noah looked at her for a long time. Then, without a word, he crawled up beside her on the couch and rested his head against her shoulder. "It's okay," he said. "You're here now." And in that moment, Jack felt something inside him crack open, like ice splitting after a long, cruel winter. Later that night, after Noah had fallen asleep, curled against the blankets, Jack stood in the doorway of the living room, watching Emma rest. She opened her eyes. "You didn't have to come after me." Jack crossed his arms. "Yeah, well, I did." She studied him. "Why?" He thought about it, then shrugged. "Because I've already lost you once, and I'll be damned if I let that happen again." Emma's eyes welled, and Jack stepped forward, kneeling beside the couch. "I don't know what this is anymore," he said softly. "But I know I'm tired of carrying the weight of what we never said. I'm tired of pretending Noah doesn't deserve to know you." She reached for his hand. "He's ours," she said almost reverently. Jack nodded. "He always was." And as the wind howled outside and the fire crackled beside them, two people who had once been broken sat together in the quiet, rebuilding something stronger than before. One truth, one heartbeat at a time. The snow fell softly through the pines the next morning, blanketing the world in silence, as if nature itself had paused to catch its breath. Inside the cabin, the fire had burned low. Emma sat at the kitchen table, her hands curled around a steaming mug of tea. Jack was nearby, quietly fixing the latch on the back door. Noah slept upstairs, exhausted after the night before. They hadn't spoken much since the storm. There was warmth in the air, but also something heavier, something waiting. To be said, Jack finished his task and turned to her, brushing the sawdust from his palms. "You should rest." "I can't," Emma said. Her voice was steady, but her eyes trembled. "Not until you know everything." Jack pulled out the chair across from her and sat. He didn't interrupt, didn't reassure. He simply waited, like a man who'd learned that the most important truths often arrive slowly, painfully, and on their own terms. Emma took a breath. "My father was a man who never liked to lose control. Not in business, not in family, especially not with me." She looked out the frosted window, as if seeing years instead of snow. "When I told him I was pregnant, he was furious. He called you poor, directionless, said you were using me. I was too ashamed to argue. I thought maybe he was right." Jack's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Emma continued. "He flew me to New York the next day, took my phone, cut me off from everything. I wasn't allowed to write, to call, and when I gave birth, he told me the baby would be better off without me." She swallowed hard, fingers tightening around her mug. "They said you refused contact, that you never wanted to be a father, and I believed it. I was weak, Jack. I believed them because I wanted to believe I hadn't lost everything." Jack leaned back slowly, the words hitting him like quiet thunder. "So what happened after?" Emma hesitated, then added, "I stayed. I worked in the company. I learned to survive in his world, hard, fast, emotionless. When he passed, he left me everything. Suddenly, I was the head of a billion-dollar legacy I never wanted." Jack stared at her, stunned. She met his eyes. "I was a billionaire, yes, but I was also alone. I had wealth, but no peace. I built foundations, donated to charities, funded schools, but nothing filled the hole I'd left behind. Jack's voice was rough. And that hole was Noah. She nodded. Every birthday I wondered if he missed me, if he knew my name. I thought of coming back so many times, but I was a coward. And then, she paused, her gaze softening. Then I saw the article about a mechanic named Jack Turner up in the mountains who'd won a community award for helping repair homes. After the floods, there was a picture, you holding a boy in your arms. Jack frowned. That was last year. Emma's voice broke. I knew the boy. I didn't even need to look twice. It was Noah, our son. Jack leaned forward, hands clasped. Why didn't you reach out then? Emma looked away. I didn't, and know if I deserved to. The room fell silent. Outside, the snow thickened. Inside, it felt like time itself had stilled. Jack stood slowly and walked to the window, staring out at the trees. I always wondered what happened to you, he said, voice low. I thought I did something wrong, that I wasn't enough. Emma turned to him. No, Jack, you were the only thing that was ever enough. Jack didn't move. You know what hurts most? It's not just the years we lost. It's the years Noah lost. A son should know his mother. Emma rose to her feet, walked to stand beside him. Do you think he'd ever forgive me? Jack looked at her, then toward the stairs where their son still slept. He's got your eyes, he said, but he's got a bigger heart than either of us. If anyone can forgive the past, it's him. Emma closed her eyes. I want to tell him everything. Jack paused, then nodded. Not yet, he said gently. He's just a kid. Let him get to know you a little longer, as Emma, not as a ghost come back from the dead. She nodded. Okay. They stood side by side, watching the snow fall, the weight of the truth settling between them, not as a burden, but as the beginning of something honest. That afternoon, Noah came downstairs and found Emma sitting near, the fire quietly sketching something in her notebook. He climbed onto the couch beside her. What are you drawing? He asked. She smiled. A cabin. Like this one? Exactly like this one, she said, except maybe with a garden out front and wind chimes. Noah nodded. I like that. Then, after a moment, he added, You look like someone I used to dream about. Emma's breath caught. What do you mean? I used to dream I had a mom, he said softly, but she never had a face, just a feeling. Emma bit her lip to keep from crying. I think, Noah said, laying his head on her arm, you feel like her. Emma wrapped her arms around him, holding him as tightly as she dared, her heart breaking and healing all at once. Jack stood in the kitchen, pretending not to watch, but he did, and he smiled. Because sometimes truth doesn't shatter. Sometimes it rebuilds. The first sign that the outside world had noticed came quietly, like most trouble in small towns. It started with a knock. Jack opened the front door to find Martha Calloway standing on the porch, her arms crossed beneath a thick wool shawl, her lips pursed in that way she always did when she was curious, but pretending to be concerned. Morning, Jack, she said, peeking around him like she expected someone to materialize from behind the curtains. Morning. Martha, he replied, guarded. I was just dropping off some fresh preserves, she said, holding up a jar with too much enthusiasm. Peach this time. Thought Noah might like it. Jack took the jar, nodded his thanks. Martha lingered. I heard you've got company up at the cabin. Jack's brow lifted. That right. A woman, I'm told. Been seen walking into town. Real pretty, quiet. Doesn't talk much. Jack exhaled slowly. She's a friend. Needed some space. The cabin was empty. Martha nodded as if affirming something to herself. Well, you know how folks are. They notice things. They wonder. I'm not concerned with wondering, Jack said, and neither should they be. Martha hesitated, then gave a polite, tight-lipped smile and turned back toward the road. As she left, Jack spotted the unmistakable glint of a cell phone in her hand. She was already texting someone before she reached the fence. By the end of the week, Emma had become a quiet sensation. It wasn't just her mysterious arrival or her beauty. It was the subtle way she moved through town, how she paid in cash, how she avoided giving a last name, how she didn't seem to belong, and yet seemed to know things about the town no stranger should. At the general store, whispers curled like smoke around the aisles. "Jack's seeing someone, they say. He's got a boy, doesn't he? Wonder what she's after. She doesn't act like someone passing through. Maybe she's hiding something. It wasn't malice, not yet. But curiosity in a small town had a way of growing teeth. Jack tried to shield her from it. He walked with her down Main Street, chin up, calm, steady. He took Noah to school and didn't flinch when the other parents offered polite nods that barely concealed their glances. He stood by Emma in line at the hardware store and dared anyone to ask the questions behind their eyes. But Emma felt it. At first, she brushed it off. A lifetime in boardrooms had given her thick skin. But this was different. This wasn't about business or media. This was about belonging or not. That evening, as they sat on the porch, Emma leaned against the railing, arms wrapped around herself. "They know," she said softly. Jack didn't ask what she meant. He knew, Emma continued. "Not everything, but enough to make up the rest." Jack leaned back in the chair beside her. "You're not doing anything wrong. I'm a billionaire, pretending to be a ghost," she said with a sad smile. "People hate what they can't label." "You're not pretending," Jack said. "You're healing. That takes time." She looked at him. "Maybe I should go." Jack turned toward her sharply. "No. You saw what happened with Martha. It's only a matter of time before someone starts digging. And once they do, let them dig," he said. "We have nothing to hide." Emma's voice dropped. "Jack, the world I come from doesn't forgive easily. They'll twist this. They'll paint it like I abandoned my child and ran away, to hide with the first man who didn't ask questions. And they'll hurt you. And Noah," Jack stood. "Let them try." Emma looked up at him, heart in her throat. Jack stepped closer. "I've lived half a life trying to protect what little I had left. But I'm done hiding. If they want to talk, let them. But you're not leaving again. Not unless you choose to." Emma blinked back tears. "And if I choose to stay?" Jack smiled, a rare, full smile that reached the corners of his eyes. "Then we build something real. This time, with both hands." Later that night, after Noah had gone to bed, Jack sat by the fire carving something small from cedar wood, a habit he'd picked up after Emma moved in. His hands moved with practiced ease, but his mind wandered. Emma sat across from him, sketchbook in her lap. "You never told me what you're making," she said. Jack didn't look up. "It's a chime for the porch. Thought we could use a bit of music when the wind comes." Emma smiled. "That's beautiful." He glanced at her. "I was going to give it to you when the time was right." Emma tilted her head. "What time would that be?" Jack hesitated, then set the carving down and reached into the side drawer. He pulled out a small, hand-carved box. Emma's breath caught as he opened it. Inside was a ring, not gold or diamond-studded, but made from polished walnut wood, smooth and warm. "I don't have money," Jack said simply, "and I can't give you the life you had before, but I can give you something real, something honest." Emma stared at him, overwhelmed. "This ring," Jack continued, "was carved from the beam of the old cabin, the one we fixed together. I thought maybe we could start again from there." Tears filled her eyes. She didn't say yes. She didn't need to. She took the ring, slid it onto her finger, and leaned across the table, pressing her forehead against his. Outside, the snow began to fall again, quiet and slow. And for the first time in years, they weren't running from the world. They were standing still together. The snow began to melt as November gave way to a timid Montana December, softening the earth and revealing the rugged, beautiful mess of pine needles, mud, and old stone walkways beneath. Jack stood outside the cabin, sleeves rolled, saw in hand, sweat already collecting at his brow despite the cold air. The sun peeked over the ridge, casting a golden haze across the clearing. Sawdust floated like pollen in the breeze. Behind him, Emma stepped out onto the porch, cradling a mug of coffee. She was barefoot, always barefoot now, her hair loose, her eyes softer than he'd ever seen them. "Are you sure you don't want help?" she asked. Jack glanced at her with a grin. "Last time you used a hammer, I had to replace the drawer." Emma smiled unbothered. "Creative carpentry. You should thank me." "You want to help?" Jack asked. "You can paint." Emma looked at the side of the cabin, half-primed and flaking. "Deal." Noah soon joined them, dragging a pail of nails far too heavy for him and wearing an oversized work belt that kept slipping around his waist. "I'm in charge of important things," he declared. "Like what?" Jack teased. "Like making sure you both take snack breaks and that no one bleeds." Emma laughed. "We'll make you foreman." The air between them was light, easy. They were no longer navigating pain, but possibility. For days, they worked. Side by side, Emma sanded and painted while Jack replaced the windows. They installed a new stove, rebuilt the porch railing, and even dug out the path leading to the garden Emma had sketched weeks before. There was something holy in the rhythm of it, in the way Noah fetched screws, in the way Emma tucked her hair behind her ear when she focused, in the way Jack would pause just for a breath to take it all in. One night, after a full day of work, they lay on their backs on the porch roof, looking at the stars. Noah was asleep inside. The air was cold, but they were warm under a single blanket. Emma turned her head toward Jack. "Do you ever think this could have been our life all along?" Jack was quiet for a long time. "Sometimes, but then I think maybe we weren't ready back then." Emma nodded. "We were just kids." Jack turned to her. "But we're not now," she smiled faintly. "No? Now we know what matters." The next morning, Emma stood in the center of the cabin, looking around. It was almost complete, not perfect, not polished, but whole. She turned to Jack. "I want to stay." He blinked. "Here? In the cabin?" "Yes," she said. "Not just here. Here with you. With Noah. I want to build a life from what we've rebuilt." Jack set down his tool belt. "Emma, are you sure? Because this isn't the world you came from." She walked to him and took his hand. "No, Jack. That world, those offices and planes and hollow conversations, that's not my world anymore. This is." He looked at her, searching her face for doubt, but all he saw was conviction. "And love? Then let's make it official," he said softly. Emma smiled. "We already did." She lifted her hand, showing him the wooden ring he had carved. She'd never taken it off. They didn't throw a grand party. There was no announcement in the local paper, no registry, no gown. Instead, they gathered a few close friends, Jack's mechanic buddies, Noah's favorite schoolteacher, and Mrs. Benning from the diner, who always gave extra syrup on his pancakes. They stood in a circle in the yard outside the cabin, surrounded by pine trees and candles in mason jars. Emma wore a simple white dress that had belonged to her mother. Jack wore his cleanest flannel shirt. Noah held a basket of pine cones, tossing one every time he got too excited. Jack took Emma's hands, voice thick with emotion. "I don't have fancy words, but I have you, and that's all I need." Emma smiled through tears. "You gave me back everything I thought I'd lost, and you didn't ask for anything in return." Noah tugged at Jack's sleeve. "You forgot to say the I do part." Everyone laughed. "I do," Jack said, looking straight into Emma's eyes. Emma leaned down and kissed Noah's forehead. "And I do too." Later that night, as the fire crackled and the guests had gone, Jack stood at the window watching the wind roll across the trees. Emma approached from behind, resting her chin on his shoulder. "What are you thinking?" she asked. Jack exhaled. "I'm thinking how strange life is, how the world can fall apart and still give you a second chance." Emma smiled. "Not strange, just merciful." Jack turned to her. "You didn't just come back, Emma. You brought us home." They stood there for a long time, wrapped in quiet and warmth, as snowflakes began to fall again, soft, slow, like blessings returning to where they belonged. It wasn't the announcement that made the town change. It was the way she looked at people. After the small ceremony, Emma began spending more time in town. She walked into the general store with dirt on her hands and paint in her hair. She carried bolts of fabric and asked real questions about roofing nails, vegetable seeds, and which wood stove worked best through harsh winters. She didn't hide anymore. People didn't understand it at first. The woman who'd arrived alone and unnamed had suddenly become Jack Turner's wife, Noah's stepmother, and, most shockingly, a permanent resident. Martha Calloway was the first to speak it out loud at the diner. "She's not like the others," she said, stirring her coffee thoughtfully. "Most folks with money come through here acting like they've got better places to be. She just sits like she belongs." And slowly, the tide shifted. By the end of December, Emma was on a first-name basis with half the town. The same whispers that once questioned her now carried a kind of respect tinged with wonder. People still didn't know exactly who she was until the day she told them. It happened at the town's community fundraiser, a modest gathering held each year to repair the local school's heating system or save the library from one more budget cut. Emma had donated quietly for weeks under the name E. Rowan. But this year, she stood beside Jack in the town hall's wood-paneled gathering space, a paper in her hand, and Noah clinging to her side like a shadow. She didn't ask to speak. She simply did. "My name is Emma Rowan," she began. "Some of you have heard pieces of my story. Others may have guessed it. But today I want to tell you all the truth, not because I need to, but because I want to." The room quieted, save for the hum of the old radiator in the corner. "I was born into a world where everything had a price," she continued. "I was taught that power meant silence and that love was conditional. For a long time I believed that. I followed it. I benefited from it." She paused, looking down at Noah, who squeezed her hand. "And then I lost everything that mattered, because I let others decide what I was allowed to fight for." Jack watched her, his chest full of something heavier than pride. Something like awe. "But life," Emma said, her voice steady, "has a strange way of leading us back to what we should have never left behind." She looked out at the townsfolk, at faces lined by wind and hard work, at neighbors who had quietly watched, judged and now listened, with something approaching reverence. "I came here thinking I could hide," she said, "but instead I was found, not by money, not by legacy, but by a boy who forgave me and a man who never stopped being decent, even when life gave him every reason to be otherwise." She stepped back and unfolded a document from her coat. "This," she said, "is a deed. It grants the Turner family, Jack, Noah, and now me, ownership of 30 acres of land surrounding the old cabin. But it also does something else." She looked toward the school principal seated in the front row. "I've designated 5 acres of that land to the town, to be used as a public retreat, a space for foster kids, veterans, and anyone who needs healing. We'll build cabins one by one, and we'll start with the one Jack rebuilt. For me." There was silence. Then applause, gentle at first, then rising like a tide of warmth. Jack stood beside her, stunned. "You didn't tell me," he murmured. Emma leaned in, her voice low. "It's your kindness that built that cabin. I'm just passing it on." Later, that week, Emma sat on the porch steps with Noah, a hand-carved map spread between them. Together they planned where the garden would go, where the cabins for guests would be built, and where the pond Jack once joked about might one day sit. Jack walked out with lemonade and watched them from the doorway, heart too full to speak. Emma looked up. "We're thinking of calling it Turner Hollow." Jack raised an eyebrow. "We," Noah grinned. "We voted." Emma stood and walked over, pressing a folded envelope into Jack's hand. "What's this?" he asked. "My resignation letter," she said. "From the board, from the company, from all of it." Jack's breath caught. "You sure?" "I've spent years owning things that never felt like mine," she said. "Now I want to belong somewhere, not just be in charge of something." He opened the envelope, then folded it back carefully. "You already belong," she smiled. "So do you." One evening, a family from town came to visit, people Emma had never met, with a little girl who barely spoke. They walked the trail, peeked inside the cabin, and sat quietly on the porch swing. "She hasn't smiled in weeks," the mother whispered, nodding toward the girl. Emma knelt down. "Would she like to pick a stone for the fireplace? We're building a hearth for the next cabin." The girl nodded. It was a small thing, but it was everything, and so the cabin became something more than a home. It became a beginning, a place where second chances weren't just possible, they were expected. And in every board Jack hammered, every sketch Emma drew, every laugh Noah let echo through the trees, something beautiful took root, something no storm could ever tear down again. Spring arrived as quietly as Emma had come. The last snow melted into thirsty soil. Wildflowers bloomed across the ridge. Birds returned to the pines with songs that sounded like forgiveness. The cabin, their cabin, stood tall and weathered, but warm, like a soul that had been tested and found whole again. The porch had new railings. The wind chime Jack carved swayed gently, each note a whisper of things that could have been lost, but weren't. On a clear Sunday morning, Jack stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the sleeves of his only white shirt. "You look nervous," Emma teased, stepping into the room behind him. Her dress was simple, linen, soft blue, the same color as the lake they once dreamed of taking Noah to. "I rebuilt a roof during a hailstorm with a broken ladder," Jack said, clearing his throat. "This is worse." Emma laughed, and he turned to see her properly. Her eyes, her face, the way she tilted her head when she smiled, it all still hit him like the first time. "You sure you want to do this?" he asked, half grinning, half serious. She stepped closer, reached up to smooth his collar. "Jack Turner. I've never been more sure of anything in my life." Outside, Noah's voice rang out, high and excited. "They're here. Everyone's here." The wedding took place beneath the trees, in the clearing beside the garden they'd planted together. Friends, neighbors, and even a few curious strangers had gathered. Some bringing pies, others homemade jam, all bringing open hearts. No altar, no pews. Just a wooden bench Jack built that morning, and wildflowers in mason jars. Noah stood proudly between them, holding a small wooden box Jack had carved just for this moment. He was both best man and ring-bearer, and he took both jobs very seriously. The local pastor cleared his throat and smiled at the couple before him. "Marriage," he began, "is not built on perfection. It is built on return, on choosing each other after the storm, again and again." Jack turned to Emma. "I once thought I lost you forever, but somehow life brought you back. Not just to me, but to our son, to this home. I don't need a promise. You being here is enough, but I'll still give you one. I'll never let go again." Emma's eyes filled. "I thought I had ruined everything, that I had no right to come back, but you and Noah, you gave me something I didn't believe I deserved, a second chance. So here's mine to you. I choose you, not just today, but every ordinary day after this." They didn't wait for the pastor's cue. They kissed, gentle and sure. The crowd applauded. Some wiped their eyes. Martha Calloway sniffled loudly and pretended it was allergies. That evening, when the guests had gone and the stars lit the sky like scattered lanterns, Jack took Emma's hand and led her into the cabin. "Wait here," he said, disappearing into his small workshop. She stood in the center of the room, still. In her dress, arms wrapped around herself, the cabin smelled of pine and fresh bread. The fire glowed low. It was the kind of quiet that made you feel safe. Jack returned, holding something behind his back. "I wanted to give you something special," he said. He handed her a small cedar box. Emma opened it slowly. Inside was a pendant, a single ring of polished wood, carved from the beam above their bed. In its center was a tiny stone, smooth, gray, and heart-shaped. "I found that stone the day we rebuilt the fireplace," Jack said softly. "Noah picked it up. Said it looked like something we should keep. I guess he was right." Emma reached for it, her fingers trembling. "It's beautiful. It's ours," Jack said, "like everything we build now." She slipped the chain around her neck, then leaned into his arms, her head resting on his chest. "Do you ever think," she whispered, "how strange it is that it all began with a broken-down car on a dirt road?" Jack kissed the top of her head. "No, it began long before that, and it'll keep beginning every day we choose each other again." Outside, Noah sat on the steps of the porch, a notebook in his lap. He was writing a speech he said he'd give someday, maybe when they opened the second cabin or the third, maybe when someone else needed to be reminded that lost things can be found again. He looked up at the cabin. Inside, there was laughter, then the sound of a chair scooting back, then music, old, soft, and familiar. Noah smiled. He didn't have to understand all the pain they'd carried. He only knew one thing now: his mom and dad were home, and so was he. Years later, people would come from all over to visit Turner Hollow, not for the scenery, though it was beautiful, not for the cabins, though they were warm and welcoming, but for something harder to name, something you could only feel when you stood at the threshold of a little wooden cabin where kindness had rebuilt what the world once tore apart. And if you were lucky, you'd hear the chimes in the wind, singing a song about second chances and the kind of love that never truly leaves. Before you go, we'd love to hear from you. Where in the world are you watching from? Drop a comment below and let us know. Your words mean more than you know. If this story touched your heart, consider subscribing to the channel so you won't miss the next tale of kindness, love, and second chances. From the bottom of our hearts, thank you for spending your time with us today. We're so grateful you're here. Until next time, take care and keep believing in the good.